What's up, Team Tobias? What's up, Cantonville, Ohio?
Canton,
I might
Ohio.
Cantonville. I just made up a town.
You
Unless you
did.
live in Cantonville, then say what's up. We're all here pretty. We got our hair done, and you got your hair done, right? Because I got mine done.
And
So
mine just looks like this.
Well, your hair is always fabulous, Jackie.
No, it's
lizard
like that.
overlords. They get to do what they want.
Right.
So what is up? We are going to talk about publishing timelines. This is a question we get a lot about. And take it away. I can't speak English today.
So we collectively have been discussing a lot since, I don't even know. I think it's been a while, since 2020, like just how things have changed and shifted within the industry and how things just in general are taking just a little bit longer. I think a lot of editors have reclaimed their personal time that they had been using in the past to catch up on submissions or edits or things that they can't do during their general normal 9 to 5 workday. But they're reclaiming that time for their own personal use, as they should. I don't think anyone should be expected to work outside of their normal business hours. Like that shouldn't be something that they have to do in order to sustain themselves. Well, I mean, that's a conversation that we could have, which is that maybe publishing needs to hire more people and help support their staff a little bit more, yada, yada, yada. So anyhow, so things just generally take longer. And so we kind of wanted to have a conversation about publishing timelines, how we've seen them shift, and what you can expect as authors out there, either, querying authors or authors on submission, that might be able to be helpful to you.
Excellent. So you're both querying authors or authors that at one time had to query. How long did it take you to get your agents, if that's an okay question to ask?
Well, I queried in two different time periods, because at one point I was querying fiction and at another point later I was querying nonfiction. And the fiction querying, I was writing dystopian at the tail end of the YA dystopian craze. And that, I got a lot of full reads and stuff like that, but the timing was, so that sort of took a long time. The nonfiction was very quick because I had my first nonfiction trade piece was a fairly niche piece, and there was a very limited universe of agents I could send it to. So I sent it to about a dozen agents and very quickly signed with someone. The division between the sort of dozen agents I sent it to, where some of them said it's really niche, you should probably self-publish it. And some of them said, yeah, we could work on this. So that was unusual because it was a very specific thing. But when I was querying fiction, that did take a lot longer, and ultimately it didn't work out.
The first time I queried fiction, I was not agenting at the time. I was an intern, but I was not agenting. So I sent out widely. I got reads, but like nothing really happened and blah, blah, blah. The second time I started querying, I was already an agent. So that made it more difficult for me in a lot of respects, because I didn't want to, I don't know. It's hard being an agent and looking for an agent. So I was very targeted on who I sent things to. And it did take some time, but didn't send it out to a lot of people before I ended up getting my agent. So there's that. But it was also
I should say
a better project.
So. I was also kind of the opposite, that I wasn't an agent either time that I was querying. I became an agent relatively shortly after I signed with my agent. So that was also an interesting conversation, because it just felt weird, to say to someone representing my work, hey, by the way, I've decided to be an agent, but at least I was being an agent in a completely different field. And of course, she was fine with it.
Okay. So how long do you think it took you to go through edits on your first book with your agent? I've never been agented. Have I? No. I don't know. I don't think so. So my question stands.
Jackie, do you want to?
Oh, I started last time. I was going to defer to you.
Oh, okay. I will. I'll jump in. So, I don't know. I mean, it took us a few months, I guess, to go through a couple rounds of edits on the first book. So yeah. So I think. I mean, it took some time. I think it's going to vary depending on the agent. It's going to depend on, and I think that's what I think we're here to discuss is like why things can take so long so for example, like I have clients who have just recently decided that they all have finished projects at the same time and they all sent them to me. And so now it usually would take me about a month to read a book, send back notes, and move on with it. But if I get 7 manuscripts in the same week, I can't do a 1-month turnaround on 7 manuscripts. It's not possible. So when I had sent this off to my agent, this was a few years ago, I guess now. I don't even know what time is anymore, just to be clear. I think we're in the middle of June. I don't know how that happened. No idea. So I sent it off to her and so it was a good timing. So she had time on her schedule. She could look at it, get back to me relatively quickly. And so we could go back and forth relatively quickly. It still took a couple months because she had to do the work. Then I had to do the work and then she had to read it again and yada, 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 yada. So I think that that's part of this conversation is that while that didn't take a lot of time, I'm betting right now if I was like, hey, Ava, here's this brand new full manuscript I just wrote, she'd be like, great, I'm going to put it in line with the rest of the manuscripts that I also have sitting here waiting for me to read. Because I don't know if you're like this, Jackie, or if you've experienced this, Lane, but just recently I've just had a lot of clients just finishing projects. And I feel like it's like this revolving door of new submissions coming in, not submissions, but new projects coming into me to review, to get back to them. And so, which is a great problem to have, but then that's why I've been closed to queries for all this time, is because I really can't take something on that's new while I'm working on all these things for my clients currently.
Yeah, I think there's something in the air or something in the water, because I had all of my clients send me full completed projects all at the same time. I think I'm down to my last 3 or 4, but I had a lot. And hence why I'm slower than usual in Query Manager, if anyone is waiting on me. In terms of the original question, which was how long edits took, mine is a little different because it was a nonfiction proposal. So most of the work, I think I did about 3 rounds of edits with 2 agents, because the agent I submitted to is not theoretically the agent who reps me. She passed it along and the 2 of them worked together. So each of them did an edit and then they both looked at a final edit before it went out. But we weren't editing the manuscript so much as we were looking at, how we structured the market section and the overview and the positioning and tweaking what aspects of my bio we were going to emphasize, because as anyone working in nonfiction knows, you really need some kind of a platform. And that really does mean either you have a big sort of following or you're a recognized expert in a particular field. And, at the time I had really very little of a social media following. I mean, I still don't have a huge social media following. But I was a recognized expert. So it was sort of tweaking that aspect of the proposal. And I think what we did was we switched. There's a lot of anecdotes that explain a concept in that book. So I know we swapped some out. We made some a little more contemporary but that was very small line level stuff. So, you can turn those edits around quickly because they're fairly contained. And I think nonfiction is just often a slightly different animal to a full novel.
I'm going to segue into that when talking about clients sending in manuscripts, because, I represent a lot of horror and, agents represent romance, thrillers. They have a specialty. So I think part of what takes time submission wise, from edit period, is there are so many clients and there are only so many editors or acquire that genre.
Mm-hmm.
And because editors are always, jumping ship, you have to, it's not just like, oh, I know who I'm going to send this to, so let me spit out this submission list in 5 minutes. No, in a week, the person who was the executive editor at Putnam could then be an associate editor at Simon and Schuster. That's an extreme example, but it is that stuff happens. So, I mean, I take a lot of time. I don't know if you all do this, I assume, to research, to look who's acquiring, who is new. Do I send it to an assistant or an associate who is hungry to get that big deal? Or do I send it to a VP who has a very tight list? And it's juggling, because I don't like sending out a manuscript to everyone all at once. I think it's kind of, it's like a scatter shot. And
Right.
that's not me. I like to take, small targeted rounds, so I can say I'm sending it to these 6 people because I know these 6 people are the best for it. And that works well. Sometimes it takes a year to sell a book. It's just the nature of the beast, I think.
Yeah, I like to call it the editor Tetris, because you're just trying to like fit the pieces in together, right? To make sure that they all line up. Another thing that is relevant is that we don't want our authors competing with each other in-house for deals. And so we have to be very cognizant of like who we're sending it to. Could this affect acquisitions if, another project from the same agent is going up at the same time? That kind of thing. So there's a lot of moving pieces that are involved in getting a project out on submission.
And I think that's the same when you're taking on clients as well. I can think of at least 2 occasions where I've had a client I'm very interested in working with who does write in a similar area, sometimes an incredibly similar area to another client. And usually, well, it depends on the situation. Sometimes I'll go to the original client and say, I have this person doing this. Would that bother you? It's the 2 cases I can think of, it worked out and I took on the client and it wasn't actually as similar as I thought it was. And I like to take on clients who have a range of projects so we can time them differently. So we're not going out with the same project at the same time. We'll go out with something else while that person is out on sub with this thing. But it happens at both levels. It happens when you're looking for an agent and when the agent is playing editor Tetris.
Absolutely. Like in my submission box, I've had things that I've had for a while. I'm sure authors out there are listening. They know that I've had something of theirs for a hot minute. And there's things that I'm really, really interested in, but I'm also like juggling what I currently have on my list. And so while I don't really want to say no to this, because I really do enjoy something about it and I really like it and I like the author and I really would hope to work with them. So I don't really want to close the door, but I also don't have the space at the time to get them to fit into that, that Tetris situation that I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
And it's even more true because I don't even know if that's what I want to say, but I've had clients deliver books that are the same premise at the exact same time, totally independently of each other.
Yeah.
And I mean, the books are obviously totally different, but, I think it was Aristotle that said there was only so many plots.
Yeah.
Shakespeare said it. It's either a comedy or a tragedy,
It's actually funny to me as a copyright lawyer because I very often get people coming to me and saying, this person clearly stole my idea. And it's like, if you saw an agent's inbox, you would see that nothing is truly original, that there is not one thing that you can come up with that hasn't in some way been done before. So it's how you do it. It's not the concept behind it, most usually.
I didn't know you got messages like that. That's Fascinating.
Usually, I mean, it'll be at a conference or someone will email my consulting business and say, oh, I'm absolutely certain. And it's like, well, if you really dug into it, you'd see this person, if you looked at the timeline, the person couldn't have looked at this person's work because there was no way they could have seen it and they didn't know any of the same. I mean, and in a copyright case, you have to prove that the alleged infringer had access to the original work. And most of the cases they do, and there is a record that establishes that. But a lot of people, where it is just completely independent, similar, because ideas are finite. I agree. I think ideas are finite.
Yeah, I mean, my cousin worked with Walt Disney like 75 years ago. And back then he was saying there hasn't been an original idea in 75 years. Oh, that's 150 years back at least.
Yeah. I mean, it is surprising to me because we are very proprietal about our work, and certainly the way you execute a piece is all your own. But that doesn't mean you own the concept behind it, because there's a million different ways of, as mentioned previously, I teach adult ed courses on writing here and there every now and then. And I remember one in-person class before the pandemic where one of my students wanted information about how to query an agent, but was so terrified, and we've all heard this kind of story, so terrified that he'd give away his secret source and the agent would steal his idea. And it's like, that's not how ideas work. I mean, that's not how books work,
No.
And when he waited till the class had ended. He made us shut the classroom door so he could tell me his secret idea and I could tell him what to do with it. It's like, it had been done a million times before. And I didn't have the heart to tell him that. I said, well, here's some books you might enjoy reading. But, because, it's like, I think everyone who wants to write should write and take a class and express yourself. But it doesn't mean that you have the most original idea. You have to learn to express your idea in a marketable way if you want to publish it.
And originally.
Yes.
Speaking of the pandemic, when the paper shortages struck and they were pushing books back, so I think the publishing timeline expanded then. We were looking at 2, 3, 4 years, whereas do we think, I know my answer, it has rebounded so that we're back to that 18 to 24 months?
I think in some areas we have, and I think in some areas we're still pushing those boundaries. So I think, this is not my expertise, so maybe Jackie could speak more eloquently to it. But from what I've noticed is that picture books, for example, are still very crowded, and it's very hard to get a picture book sale at this time because they're still trying to get out those books that they had bought before. So that timeline has shifted quite a bit. I think in novels, I think we are rebounding much quicker than we are in picture book space.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot happened in picture books were tremendously overbought for a number of reasons at that time. Illustrators were just, the fewer illustrators I represent, they're just bombarded with work, and illustrators are booked up till 2027 at the moment, which delays when a new picture book can come out. I mean, graphic novels, I think anything that has a sort of a high production value that needs a lot of manual input like that. I am seeing novels rebound much quicker, and I'm always surprised, like when we look at a pub date for a nonfiction or a novel and it's like, oh, that's like 18 months. That's amazing. I'm used to like 3 years with picture books. And then nonfiction is its own thing, because nonfiction, depending on where you publish, there's often review processes, and stuff like that. And that depends on people being available to really evaluate stuff. So, yeah, I think somewhat we're back to normal, and somewhat we're not.
I think we're still also dealing with what I kind of started at the beginning with, is that editors are reclaiming
Right.
their personal time. And so when we send something in, it's now taking longer for them to get back to us, just generally speaking. So, I mean, of course, there's always the exceptions to the rules, and those are great. And we love it when the exceptions happen. But I think overall, overwhelmingly, agents across the board, authors probably can speak to this too, that they're out on sub for much longer periods of time than they ever used to be.
I think there's people, they got dogs, they got cats, they got family, they got vacations, just like I do and you do.
On the other side, there's fewer editors. We can't, as Anne said, be doubling up and having our clients compete with each other, because that doesn't do anyone any good. We can't be out on submission with multiple projects all the time, because we said in a prior podcast, then editors just delete us because it's like, oh, another million submissions from this agent. So it's tough, because I always want to be comforting, but I can't wave a magic wand and make publishing be faster and more communicative than it is.
I really wish we could have a magic wand.
That would be cool. That would be really cool.
Really cool.
Yeah, and I'm a super impatient person. I don't know if you've noticed.
Oh, I am too, though.
No, Lane, I haven't noticed that at all about you. That's so interesting. Tell us more.
Because Anne will slack me, and I'm like, I'm not slacking. I'm calling her.
And
have
then,
that magic wand.
When you get the deal, then you have to wait for the contract, and new authors are always shocked by that. It's like, you're with these big publishers and they expect the contract to materialize overnight, and it's like, no, because if there are less editors than there used to be, there are a lot less people in the contracts department than there used to be.
And all the deals are piling up, and they're 6 weeks, 8 weeks behind, and like, cool, we agreed to this awesome deal. Now I'm not going to see a contract for 2 months. I'm going to see it for 2 months.
Yeah.
Let alone, sign it, because then you have to go negotiations and knife bites in the parking lot and all that kind of stuff.
I think what we've been trying to do in this episode, I guess this is an episode, right?
Yes.
Is just explain to all you wonderful authors out there that everything is just taking longer. And so you need to give yourself and give this industry a little bit more grace if this is where you want to be. It's kind of the nature of the beast at the moment. And I don't foresee it changing anytime soon. I don't think publishing houses are suddenly going to be like, you know what? We should hire a lot more people.
Let's fire more people.
I mean, is it a good idea? Yes. Should they? Absolutely. Should they give everyone raises? Yes. Yes, they should. They should do.
Are you saying it's a good idea to fire people or to hire people?
Hire people. Yes.
They
should
hire.
Okay.
Yes, they
Making
should
sure.
Hire more people. Yes, they should pay them more money. Yes, they should do all of those things. But I don't foresee that as something that's in their business plan.
Final thoughts? I assume that's your final thought, Anne, unless you would like to add something else. I love hearing your thoughts.
That's pretty much my thought. It's just, I know that there's a lot of frustration out there. I know there's a lot of concern out there. Why is this taking so long? Should I be nervous? All of those kinds of things. But really, don't be nervous. I know it's hard. I know it's anxiety ridden. I know it makes you anxious to have things out there and waiting. But the best gift you can give yourself is the gift of patience, which is, I know, very difficult. But we're all trying to fight through this together. So you're not alone in that feeling of anxiousness and just wanting to hear.
And I have a final thought, which was kind of a little buried in something Anne said a minute ago, which is, if you want to be in this game, give yourself patience, because you don't have to be in this game. I always say this, there are more avenues than ever in the history of humankind to get your work in front of people, or not even a book, your thoughts, your ideas. I mean, we have all this digital technology now that enables you to do that. So I think it is worth thinking, if you are someone who hasn't really thought about it, and I'm not telling everyone go and self-publish a book. This is a business. It's an industry. It works on money. It works on profit margins. is this the industry you want to be in? Do not want to be in this industry so desperately that you do silly things like signing contracts without an agent or attorney, without knowing who the publisher is, because I do consult. I am an attorney, I do consult. And the number of people who sign with what an Australian would call a shonky publisher, but is really like kind of a deceptive, like someone who isn't doing something actually illegal, but they are taking your money to publish your book. Do not do that, because you're so desperate to say you're a published author with a publishing contract. Do some research. Figure out, do you want to be in this industry? If you do, how do you do that? And how long will it take? And who do you need to talk to? Plan up front, because you will possibly regret it later if you don't.
I say always be writing, and that's the only way to really, I think, keep yourself busy. You got to, because it's anxiety. It's anxious. I can't speak English. It's
anxiety.
It causes a lot of anxiety to be on submission. So you always keep busy, always keep writing, which is why when I send something out on submission, I have to move on to the next. Got to keep myself going. Now, Anne. Oh, don't forget June 21st, which is this Friday. This Friday, 7 p.m., our AMA Live. It's going to be hilarious, good times. There's going to be a link in the description below. And Anne, why don't you...
Is this episode dropping before
Yes,
Friday?
It's dropping Wednesday.
Okay, perfect. So today's Wednesday for you, listeners.
Yes.
And on this Friday, 2 days from now, we're having an ANA, and you should come join us. Excellent.
7 p.m. Eastern time.
Eastern.
Because Lane never says that. And then people say 7 p.m. when?
Lizard people live on Eastern time, 7 p.m. Eastern. And take us out.
That is it for another episode of The Literary Lens with the Tobias Literary Agency. And that's Lane Haymont and Jackie Lipton. And I'm Ann Rose. Thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, we'd love for you to go ahead and drop those in the comments. Make sure you like, subscribe, and have yourself a wonderful day. Do something kind for yourself today and celebrate some sort of small win, because you deserve it.